Hello Egg Chasers, Tim here, and I'm going to be honest before I start this video, it's not a video I wanted to do, or at least it's not a video I wanted to have to do, but let's get into it. Hit subscribe, hit like, share, and leave your comments on this story from the same people that brought you study shows frequent sex enhances pregnancy chances, and high fat, high sugar diet may fuel weight gain, and most earthquake damage is caused by shaking. I bring you Premiership rugby relegation set to be suspended until at least the 24-25 season. Now, I don't know what your feelings are when you saw that headline or have just seen that headline. You might be pleased, relieved, you might be angry, ambivalent. No one's surprised, are they? Absolutely no one is shocked. And that is one of my frustrations with the way that rugby is administered at the minute, I've got to say. And I need to make a couple of things clear. Firstly, this is just a story from Chris Foyt in the Daily Mail, who may well have got an awesome scoop here ahead of anybody else. He's a good journalist and a good bloke. But it's not fact at this point in time, as we will read. And secondly, I want to make it clear that, well, these are my opinions. And I say that because I work in Premiership rugby. So just to state the obvious, two or more things can be true at once. I can love the Premiership, which I do. I can love working on the Premiership, which I do. I can conscientiously and enthusiastically and honestly work on the Premiership, which I will. And I can also have real concerns over this possible decision if it goes ahead. Serious concerns, which again, let me explain myself. So, there we go. It looks like a club potentially may not be going down for 4 years from the Premiership and potentially expanded to 14 teams in that league. In February, the RFU Council approved a moratorium on the relegation on relegation for this COVID-disrupted campaign, with the option to extend the ring fencing arrangement subject to further negotiations with various stakeholders, which it appears may have been happening and may have led to this story. As Sportsmail understands, these talks have led to a plan for no club to go down for 4 seasons, including the current one. It says, however, there is widespread desire to further expand the league, which will increase from 12 to 13 sides after this season. Saracens expected to be promoted. Not a foregone conclusion, but yeah, that's a fair comment. But Premiership clubs are keen to welcome a 14th team. They'll certainly be willing to welcome a 14th team, I imagine, if Ealing got promoted. The path is clear for ambitious Ealing Trailfinders to join the top flight in due course if they win the Championship and are willing to invest £20 to £35 million to become full shareholders. I guess this is the reality of what we're talking about. It just I don't like seeing shareholders when it comes to a professional league, but I suppose that ship sailed a long time ago. The RFU Council are due to consider the extended ring fencing system at a meeting in June. Sources have told Sportsmail the club anticipate the union will ratify the proposal, meaning Premiership clubs are protected from relegation until after July 2024. Now, one issue I have with, again, the way rugby's run at the moment is the fact that sentence, the RFU are due to consider the extended ring fencing system. What is the RFU? The Rugby Football Union, a union. Meaning, and for the purpose of this video, I'm going to assume, for argument's sake, you're a member of your local rugby club, as I am. The RFU is representing its members, i.e. you and me, and every other member of every other grassroots club up and down the league pyramid, up and down the land. That's what the RFU is. And it feels a little bit like turkeys voting for Christmas here, because the people that are representing our interests are making decisions which have direct and very possibly, probably, serious potentially as well, negative consequences on the clubs which it represents. A messy situation, which I don't like. And this next paragraph might shed some light on what it might look like in the future. After those 4 years, that is when the 8-year professional game agreement between the RFU and PRL, a funding deal worth in excess of £200 million, will expire, potentially a time of upheaval, with critical club country negotiations following a period of financial turmoil. Always framed in the context of this COVID was mentioned earlier, financial turmoil. I do get that, but that's only exacerbated what was already there. Let's be clear. BT Sport look to have acquired the rights to screen the decisive second leg of the Championship playoff, two-legged playoff in which will possibly be between Saracens and Ealing. We'll see about that. But there you go. That's the story in a nutshell. So there are several things at play here, and the financial backdrop that I just talked about can't be ignored. That self-interest is going on here. You've got wealthy business owners who have been spending their own personal fortune to keep these rugby clubs afloat and through this difficult time. But like I say, it was always like that before. So I can totally understand why, from their point of view, they would want to change the rules of the game, because it's massive personal costs to them. What I would say to that is, while I'm sympathetic to their personal situation, equally, it's not like it was written in small terms and conditions at the bottom of a very long, complicated contract. It was pretty clear when you sign up, relegation's part of the deal. So changing the rules of the game after you've shaken hands on the rules of the game, I don't like that too much, but I can understand why they'd want that. What's in the game's interest? I'll expand on that in a minute. And what's in the supporters' interest? And I'll expand on those two things. Now, a lot of people have said, looking at what's in the game's interest, a lot of people have said, well, it would be the best thing for the England national team if ring fencing happens, because teams will play a better brand of rugby, because they wouldn't have the fear of relegation. People would be able to play more of their young English players because there's no fear of relegation. Look at New Zealand. Look at Ireland. I am sympathetic to that. I understand the logic. I also think, and I've said this in videos that I've posted in the feed before, France is actually a much better comparison for England, both in terms of population, geographic location, areas of the country, south versus north, which are rugby hotbeds versus not so much. And yeah, I just think that's a far better model. And when you look at France and what they're doing, rather than condensing everything and shutting all the money and all the resources around 12 or 14 clubs, they spread the money out. They have a bottom-up and a top-down spread of money, and it's having a really positive impact. And I think this is the model for England, as I've said before. France currently has 3 full-time professional leagues. The TV deal that's been signed with Canal Plus recently, 65% of that is going to go to the top 14. 35% of it goes to the French second division. So the French second divisions are proper funded clubs. So you get great products across the board, all over the country. Great TV product with loads of games being broadcast every week. And with a third professional division now, this is how well it's going. They've got 3 professional divisions. What you're finding happening in France is the areas of the country, like in the north and Brittany, which haven't been rugby hotbeds traditionally, are now sprouting amazing players, really good clubs that are competing and aspiring to go up to the top, which is huge for French rugby. And that's going to mean, and this is what the French top 14, I think, have identified, they are going to have a 65% slice of a much, much bigger pie long term. And I think what potentially, if this goes through, what the Premiership clubs are doing is having 100% of a much smaller pie and a possibly shrinking pie. We'll see. So I definitely think the French model is what's in the game's interest. You know, I should just hop back to that. There we go. And in terms of supporters' interest, well, there's the simple fact that there are lots of clubs who aren't going to be able to aspire to do what Exeter have done and go up, and what Ealing Trailfinders are currently anticipating potentially doing if this goes through, as I say. What a gut punch for Cornish Pirates, by the way. Looking to build a stadium, looking to have a long-term view, make it financially viable, have a process of aspiring to be in the Premiership one day. Total gut punch. Actually, it looks like, no, just as long as you've got 30 million quid. As long as you've got cash, you can come to the Premiership. That's basically the message. And I don't like it. And a lot of people say, well, you know, you got Exeter down there in Devon. Do you really need the Cornish Pirates? Which ignores the history and the tradition of the sport, which is massive for supporters. And I mean, I think I'm right in saying, don't quote me on this, but I think I'm right in saying Exeter is as far away from Penzance as it is from Bristol. Or Bristol might even be closer. And also Devon v Cornwall, you've got no idea how massive a game that is in the county championship, or it was back in the day. That was a huge thing, and the rivalry, the tradition. You can't just say things like that. And then you've got Leeds and all of Yorkshire that's not going to be tapped into. How will that grow? So I've got big reservations with this. And also from a supporter and a spectator point of view, and in terms of interest, rugby ultimately in professional sport is storytelling. just like a film, just like a TV series, you're telling a story. I've said this a bunch of times and I'll say it again. And you need to tell a compelling story. You need to make people care emotionally about it. You need to make them care about the characters involved. There needs to be jeopardy. You know, one of the reasons people love Game of Thrones or 24 years ago is that anyone could die at any time. There was genuine jeopardy, and that made it gripping. So you're lopping off a massive part of the ability to tell stories. And look at the Pro 14. I give that enough stick. People Pro 14 listeners of the Egg Chasers podcast must be having a little giggle seeing this story today, thinking, what are the boys going to do? Well, if it goes the way the Pro 14's done, that's not good. That is not good. Now, I do want to say on this particular point, back in February when the RFU Council signed off the moratorium on relegation, we did a special podcast, a bit of a deep dive, which is there in our podcast feed, and I recommend you go and listen to, so I won't go over all the same points. But we did say, if ring fencing was going to be permanent, if it was going to be done forever, because, I mean, let's be honest, who thinks if this goes ahead, this will only be 4 years? This is for good. Let's be honest, it's not coming back. Like 3 weeks to flatten the curve a year later. Oh, yeah, just 4 years, honest. No. So we did a podcast which laid out if ring fencing was going to be a permanent thing, how could it work? None of us wanted it to happen. Me, JB, and Phil were all united on that, but we all thought, well, let's be proactive and try and say, how could it work? And we came up with loads of ideas which addressed a lot of the problems on keeping it competitive and jeopardy and not having loads of dead rubber games at the end of the season, on making sure there are plenty of stories to tell. And people quite often go, well, NFL doesn't have promotion relegation. That does pretty well. But the NFL has an incredible product. Storytelling is amazing with things like the draft and combines and college football and scouting and all of these different arms that they've got to tell stories in different ways. The way that they have NFL films, which make basically fly-on-the-wall documentaries about stuff. There's all sorts of ways they tell stories and get you engaged in the sport. And we covered off a load of this kind of stuff. So I'd say go and listen to that podcast if you want some solutions. What I hope is that the people running rugby are similarly coming up with a long-term view, loads of solutions, loads of ways to make it compelling and not just a money grab, self-preservation, let's hold on to the pie that we've got and not share. I hope that's what's happening. I'm sure you'd understand why I might have my reservations as to whether there is that long-term thinking and there is that growth mindset for rugby union at play here. That will be good for not just the national team, not just for the 12 or 14 Premiership clubs, but for every single club around the land. And I'll end it there because I've gone on a bit rambly and ranty. I'll just ask for your comments. And if you haven't already, please do hit subscribe. And I'll see you on the next video.